That's the funniest one.
I went down there. You know, they had an outhouse.
I remember the outhouse.
And I was going down to visit for a week. Dot and Don lived there. And Dot worked in town. And Don was there, and he was working, and he had to slop those hogs every night. They had, don't you remember the slop bucket by the kitchen door? It was nasty, but that's what the pigs ate. And all the dishwater went in, and the watermelon
Hogs had to have
rinds.
something to drink.
No.
That's what those hogs ate every night. But I went down there, and my mother said, now, there's something you need to know. They've been having trouble with that well down there, so you cannot drink any water while you're there. And she said, but I'm sure they'll have Cokes or
Carl will play. Yeah, right.
juice.
We didn't have those at Joe and Louise's. Sheesh.
They'll have something for you to drink,
No,
you know.
Kool-Aid.
And she said it's okay to drink it if it's boiled and in tea. So here I went. They took me down on a Sunday afternoon and left me there. Then I had to sleep in the bed with Dot. And the alarm clock was the rooster. They were very poor.
Yeah.
Well, that was just,
Everybody was.
country living.
Everybody was
Yeah.
You used to be a city girl. That was country living.
So I went, and Dot was quite sweet. She was very sweet, and she wanted me to be comfortable, and she was glad I was there. And she said, now, this jar under the bed is what we call a slop jar. And if you need to go to the bathroom, you go.
Well, let me tell you, Joe and Louise had those too. I keep going.
Jar.
Bill and I are very familiar with this one.
So I went to sleep, and I didn't use the slop jar, and I got up the next morning, and she said, well, you can go in this jar, or you can walk down the path and go to that outhouse. I thought, well, I think I'll go try that outhouse. So I went down there, and it was not nice. I mean, it was not groomed. It was, the briars were sticking out in the path, and I opened this door, this creaky door, and I looked in, and I looked, and there was this thing, and a Sears Roebuck catalog. She said, you know, toilet paper's expensive, and we can get Sears catalogs cheap, so you use that. And I looked at the toilet, there were spiders in there. There were spiders up in the ceiling, and I thought, good grief. So I was very quick about my business, and I rushed back up to the house, and they said, now we eat breakfast. So I sat down at the big round oak table with the claw feet underneath, and I looked at the food. And there was some hard biscuits and some fat meat out there. And here comes Irvin with a pail, a bucket of milk. And they said, he just milked the cow, and this, you can drink this.
It'd be nice and warm.
And I said, you don't have refrigerator milk? No. I drank that milk out of that pail. Well, I couldn't drink it to think it was right fresh out of the cow.
But you were thirsty.
Worst part of it, I'd be warm.
So this just went on, and I was bored to death, and there was nothing to do but to read those old medical books in that cabinet in the living room behind the curtain. And I got one out, the one that was a sex book. It had no cover. It had been read so many times. It was really
About wore it out.
dog-eared. I've still got that sex book at my house.
Oh, you do?
You said, what kind of book?
And then,
Sex book?
but I didn't
No.
quite know about that kind of stuff, so I got out
Was it
these
any-
old medical books
Was it
and
any different back then?
looked at tumors. I mean, one woman had a tumor on her back that big around. I'll show you a picture of her. I've still got her in the medical book at my house. So I looked at tumors.
That was terrible with back there.
And I looked at how to do amputations during the Civil War and you know, that kind of thing.
This was left over from Grandpa.
Yeah, it was in that
Caldwell's
cabinet.
medical
And
books.
that was my daddy's inheritance, those medical books. That's
Mary
what-
Lynn, you're lucky to be as normal as you are. Coming up like you did.
No, I wouldn't brag too much on that. I mean.
Now, how old were you when all this happened?
Oh, I was about 12 or 13. And Grandma chewed tobacco, and the sink was all brown where she's, you know, spit in the sink.
Dip snuff. So you
Uh-huh.
chewed tobacco or dip snuff?
So I really started getting thirsty, and I was sort of shy in my own kind of way. And so I thought, well, I think I'll go out there. And Grandma said, well, after you comb Laddie's hair, you can go down there and get yourself a watermelon out of the field. This dog had mange all the time and big places of skin on the dog's body and ticks that big around. And she said, while you're at it, you might get off a tick or two.
They couldn't afford Frontline back then.
And so I worked on that dog. Then I went down, and the chickens lived around there. You know, they just walked around in the yard.
Yard birds.
Yeah, and she sent me to get eggs out of the chicken nest. She said, now be careful, because black snakes get in the hen nest. So I was just already a wreck. So I went down to the field and got that watermelon. And she said, you can hit it with a rock and it'll just open up. So I got a rock, and I thought, you know, these watermelons have juice in them. Must be something I could drink. Well, I didn't know too much about whether a watermelon was ripe or not. So I started drinking watermelon juice. And that was what I got. Well, about the third night, I got a violent stomach ache. I mean, it was worse than I ever had during labor having babies. I have never experienced like that. And I started thinking about death, and I thought, you know, I might die if I don't leave this place. And they didn't have a telephone. Well, Don came, the next day, Don came home, and I was on that. They had linoleum on the living room floor, and they painted their floors brown, and then they put linoleum on it. I said, Don.
And about how old is Don now? Don's daughter.
He was
18s.
about, I must have been about 11. He was still college age, and it was summer, and he'd not. And I said, I've got to go back to Charlotte. I said, I'm very sick. And it
Let
just
me
went,
break out of here, Don.
went from bad, and none of the food was good. It was never nice. It was
Well, that's sad.
the
really.
sorriest food, the sorriest food. And Grandma was no cook. I mean, she
Oh, really?
I thought she
Not
was
a
a great
cook.
cook, huh? I thought
See,
all
my mother,
country women were
She
mother
good.
was
was-
a fabulous cook.
not a cook.
But
I
she
mean, it was just sorry food, and they'd bring out an old jar of beans from the
And
cellar.
of course, this is after Grandpa's dead now, isn't it?
Yeah,
This is all
he
after
had died.
he's, okay, you
He
were
had
3 when
died.
he died.
She was
okay.
living there, and Dot and Don were living there. Later,
Now, was Herb married at that point?
not well.
He probably
He
was.
got married, but they lived next door, and
I was gonna say,
Grandma
I
could
think
not.
Stan Daisy.
Daisy was